All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? Welcome to the North Central U.S. Climate and Drought Outlook for March 2026. My name is Doug Cluck, and we are pleased to have Allie Mazurek with the Colorado Climate Center do the presentation this month. She has a lot to talk about, especially about the West and what's been going on out there. If you have questions during this presentation, we'd love to have the questions in the question and Q&A section. If you hit more at the bottom, lower right-ish portion, there's a place in there it's called Q&A. If you put your questions in there, we'll try to answer them either as we go or at the end. So Allie will go about 35, 40 minutes, and then we'll have questions after that. If you have to use chat, you do. Some people just do, and some people get on late, and that's what they do. So one way or the other, we're going to address some of the questions and comments at the end of this. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Allie and say thank you very much for doing this, Allie.
All righty. Thank you, Doug, and thanks for the invitation. So, yeah, as Doug mentioned, I am with the Colorado Climate Center. We're at Colorado State. So we're going to be talking about the last month, which has been quite a busy month, as I guess spring months tend to go. So we'll get started here. Um, oh, I don't know if should I be mentioning anything about this, or is that you, Doug?
Oh no, you can just yeah,
All
go over
right,
a few
perfect.
things. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, here's some resources. Most of these, I also share some specific links throughout the presentation. The next webinar will be happening on April 16th. Doug, I'm sure will send out more information on that. And if you'd like to access past presentations, you can go to those links up there. Okay, so lots to talk about here. We'll start with current conditions, recent conditions, and then talk about some impacts and major events that we had going on, and then look forward to our outlook. So first starting out with recent conditions. So February was very warm across most of the US. Fourth warmest on record nationwide. For Colorado and Wyoming in our region, record warmest. You'll see that those dark red colors there. So I should say I'll show a few of these maps here. So this is ranking February average temperatures compared to 132 years of past February temperatures. So those ones that say 132nd, that would be signifying the record warmest February. So Wyoming and Colorado included in that. You'll notice that Nebraska and Kansas were not far behind, second and third warmest Februarys on record. And then other parts of the High Plains also saw well above average temperatures, including like Iowa, Missouri, etc. And then as you go further east, a bit cooler there, they kind of got some colder shots of cold air. And then taking a look at February precipitation ranks. So this is the exact same thing, but taking a look at precipitation rather than temperature. So areas that you see in brown were running below that 2-year average. And again, these are ranking the February precipitation relative to past Februaries. So nationwide, it was the fifth driest February on record, zooming into kind of this north central region. Pretty dry for most of the states there, the exceptions kind of being in the northern tier of the region, including North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, all kind of closer to average. But as you head further south, quite dry in places like Nebraska, South Dakota, Illinois. You'll see lots of top 10 dry Februaries in those areas. And we'll talk a little bit about this more later, but this dryness is definitely continuing in these locations as well. So then backing up to looking at winter as a whole. So this is now taking a look at December, January, February. So these are our wintertime average temperature ranks relative to 132 years of past winters. So nationwide, second warmest winter on record. Every state that you see here in these dark red colors saw their warmest winter on record. That includes Colorado and Wyoming. I'm from Colorado, and I believe that we set our new warmest winter on record by a degree and a half from the previous record warmest, a degree and a half Fahrenheit. So not just broke the record, but broke it by a pretty substantial amount, at least here in Colorado. And I think the same was probably true in Wyoming as well. Um, Warmth was generally the story for a lot of the Midwest and Great Lakes region as well, but if you head further to the east, Ohio actually saw a cooler than average winter, and then close to normal in states like Michigan and Indiana. And then this is looking at the same thing, but for our wintertime precipitation. Much like February, winter as a whole was generally pretty dry, fifth driest on record for the US as a whole. You'll note that quite a few states in the region here set records for top 5 dry winters, including Nebraska, Missouri, Illinois, and Kentucky. And then for the broader region as a whole, many places saw a top 10 dry winter. But Michigan being the exception here, and Wisconsin saw pretty close to normal conditions there. Okay, so now taking a look at our departure from average temperatures. So that was kind of a look at February and winter. So now we're pushing forward into mid-February through March so far. So this is showing how far off our temperatures have been from the 1991 to 2020 average. So areas that you see in these red and orange colors have been seeing above average temperatures over the last 30 days. In general, as you head further south, that warmth has been more anomalous. Further to the north, it's been a little bit closer to normal. You'll note that even though places like Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan saw a pretty significant cold blast last week, still in general over the last 30 days sitting above normal for temperatures in that period. And then this map here is showing the percent of normal precipitation that we received in the last 30 days. So again, how much does that compare to the average that we have seen over 1991 through 2020? And again, areas in these red and orangey colors are places that saw less precipitation than they normally should for this time of year. So it is worth noting that the winter time for places on the high plains does tend to be one of their drier times of year. Um, but we are getting into the springtime when those precipitation amounts should be ramping up. So definitely seeing some quite dry conditions across places like Kansas and Nebraska. But then as you head further east, actually wetter than normal conditions over the last 30 days, including across the Great Lakes region. Again, thanks to that big snow that they saw last weekend. And then now moving on to drought. So this is the latest US drought monitor. This was released just this morning. The data goes through March 17th, so this past Tuesday. Looking at the region as a whole, about 42% of the area is currently experiencing some form of drought. So that would be this D1 category in this beige color here, moderate drought or greater conditions. One kind of interesting tidbit out of Nebraska that was shared yesterday is that this is actually the largest water year to date drought condition increase that they have ever seen in a comparative period. So if you're not familiar with water years, the water year generally starts on October 1st and then goes through September 30th of the following year. So since October 1st, Nebraska has seen their most drought expansions on record for that period, about a 67.9% increase in drought conditions over the state in that period. And so this is just looking at how the drought has changed over the last 4 weeks. So this is the change in category on the US Drought Monitor. So any areas that you see in yellow or orange, those are areas where drought conditions worsened. Over the last 4 weeks, and then the green areas are locations where drought improved over the last 4 weeks. So taking a look at the eastern part of the region, generally saw some improvements there over the last 4 weeks. There definitely was some significant deficits in there during the winter. Good to see some improvements in that area. But as we head further west, the drought situation there has just continued to worsen. It's been a very dry winter for a lot of the western United States, and those conditions have just kind of persisted over the last month. And then this is backing up further to the 12-week change in drought status. A lot of the same story here, where our drought conditions have worsened in kind of the western half of the region here, whereas we've seen some improvements in the eastern part of the region. And sorry, this label at the top should say March 17th, not February 17th. So yeah, good to see some improvements there, but kind of on these longer time scales, still seeing degrading drought conditions out to the west. Some places that really stand out here are Wyoming and Nebraska. Okay, so now talking about snowpack. Here in Colorado, this has been one of our biggest stories this winter. We've been saying, at least here in Colorado, it's been our worst snowpack in at least 40 years. As many of you are probably familiar, there's a record-breaking heat wave currently taking place in the Western U.S. right now. And we've already seen, at least in parts of southern Colorado, some of those snowpack numbers start to go down. So we're definitely worried with this warmer weather over the next few days, that's really going to accelerate that snowpack melt off. And these numbers here on the right are representing snow water equivalent. So that's essentially how much water is in the snow. Um, so any areas that you see below 100% here are currently seeing below average snow water equivalent in their snow. And we like to use that metric because it's a bit more helpful than snow depth in terms of water planning and management purposes. But one thing that I do want to mention from this map is this boxed area here. These are some of the basins that are a part of the Missouri River Basin system, which is obviously pretty relevant to our North Central region. And that basin, at least in the West, has at least been in the best shape out of the Western basins. You'll see these numbers in green are at least closer to average. Still, as a basin as a whole, they are still running below average. But compared to the rest of the West, that area is kind of in the best shape right now. And then this is just looking at this a little bit more closely. So I mentioned the water year a couple slides back. So again, that runs from October 1st through September 30th of the following year. So these graphs here are showing with respect to time from this October period through September of next year. And this blue line here is showing the snow water equivalent accumulations over that period. And then this red line is that compared to average. So you will see that across the Missouri River Basin, still definitely running below average. Basin-wide, they're sitting at about 81% of that 1991 through 2020 average. So while they are in the best shape out of the West as a whole, still seeing below normal snowpack conditions there. And looking kind of more broadly in the West, this is for the Platte River Basin. You can see here that the deficits are much more significant. So looking at the North Platte Basin, sitting at 69% of average snowpack, the South Platte Basin sitting at about 65%. So certainly worse for other locations in the West, including the Platte River Basin areas. And then this is just kind of zooming out a little bit. So those past maps were kind of focusing on the West and the snowpack conditions there. But this is looking at the snow water equivalent values for our region as a whole. So these numbers here on the left are corresponding to the number of inches of snow water equivalent present in that snowpack as of today or yesterday, I believe this graph is showing. As you can see in the western areas, literally no snowpack at our lower elevations. A lot of these areas at this time of year should be covered in snowpack, at least during certain times of the winter. And that's kind of helped allow places like eastern Colorado and eastern Wyoming to warm up more than they normally should without that snowpack on the ground. But as you go further to the east, we had that big snowstorm this past weekend, and still a lot of that snowpack remaining in those areas. But this part of the region is also going to see quite unseasonably warm temperatures over the next few days as well. So we would expect kind of these thinner snowpack areas to start to melt off with those warmer temperatures. And then taking a quick look at ice on the Great Lakes region. So this graph here is showing the percent of Lake Erie covered in ice over this past winter. This black line is 2026, and then you'll see the red is average. One thing to point out here, you can see with these recent warming temperatures, pretty quick, steep drop off in ice cover over Lake Erie. So those warm temperatures have caused kind of rapidly changing conditions in those areas. But on kind of a positive note, the Great Lakes region saw their most ice coverage basin-wide since 2019. So that is perhaps one piece of positive news. And then as of yesterday, or Tuesday rather, daily ice concentrations are running slightly below average, but I've been told that there is quite a bit of variability from day to day in those numbers. So take that value with a grain of salt, if you will. All right, so now talking about impacts and major events that we've been seeing. Um, I'm realizing now that I actually forgot to include a slide on this, but we did have some significant cold that impacted parts of the Midwest area. And there is some concerns that that will have impacts on agriculture in kind of the southern portions of that region. You can see here from this image from Aaron Wilson out of Ohio, these kind of dead magnolia tree buds. Further to the north, I think there is some hope that a lot of those crops haven't started to have relevance yet because it's still wintertime there. But further to the south, where some leaf out has begun, certainly some concern of uh, stone fruits and those sorts of things. Apples, I think, were another piece of concern as well. So yeah, it's been really warm. And with this warmth, we've kind of seen spring arrive early in a lot of locations. So this is showing how many days early the leaf out date has been. So these darkest brown colors here are representing days over 20 days early leaf out compared to average. And then areas anywhere in red have been seeing leaf out conditions happen ahead of schedule. So that's kind of the story for a lot of the southern portion of our region here. And then kind of talking some more about some significant events that we've been dealing with. So wildfire has been a pretty big story over the last month. Kind of the epicenter of that has been in Nebraska. So this map on the top right here is showing significant wildfires that are burning in the western Nebraska area as we speak. That includes the Morel fire, which has burned over 640,000 acres so far. They also have another huge fire that's burned over 128,000 acres. And so Nebraska has seen already well over 500,000 acres burned, which has already put it into its worst wildfire year ever. And of course, it's only March. We're obviously a lot more concerned with wildfire risk as we head into the warmer months and in the summer. But yeah, that already breaks the previous record of number of acres burned from 2012. And again, we're only halfway through March. And Nebraska hasn't been the only location that has been dealing with wildfire conditions. I believe this was mentioned in the last webinar, but there was a pretty large fire along the Kansas-Oklahoma border. A few mesonet stations were burned there, including this one near Ashland, Kansas. I believe that the Oklahoma mesonet also had one of their stations impacted as well. Here in Colorado, we've also seen some wildfires burn. This includes one near Bromfield, Colorado, which is pretty close to the Denver metro area. So yeah, kind of these wildfires have just been very favorable given the recent drought conditions. We've been seeing above average temperature. There's been hardly any snow cover on the ground for a lot of winter. That can make the fuels, the grassland fuels, more susceptible to wildfire. And then, of course, the wind has also been a contributing factor, and we'll talk about that here on the next slide. So widespread high winds from the far western part of our region all the way east into Ohio have been a story here particularly over the last week or so. So here in Fort Collins, where I am located, we had some huge trees down throughout the city. I'm talking, trees that are 1 to 2 feet in diameter were knocked down by a major downslope windstorm. Wyoming also caught a lot of the brunt of this. Lots of accidents on the interstate there due to semi trucks being pushed over by the high winds. And then further east, their high winds were not being driven by downslope winds, but rather from a significant low pressure clipper system that moved through. In Ohio, they saw winds top out at 75 to 85 miles per hour, and they had the most power outages that they've seen since the 2012 derecho, which I'm sure several of you will remember that event. And that was a very significant widespread wind event. So, significant statistic there. And then related to these high wind conditions, some locations that were fortunate enough to see snow also saw some blizzard conditions with these high winds. And this kind of stretched from Nebraska. You'll see there was a major pileup on the interstate in Nebraska, all the way up to Michigan. Here's a picture from the National Weather Service in Green Bay. Wisconsin also saw quite a bit of snow and blizzard conditions. A lot of the northern part of the state was under blizzard warnings this past weekend. Over 2 feet of snow in some spots. So this map here on the bottom here is showing snowfall totals from the Coco-Ross Citizen Observer Network. So these are people taking snowfall measurements in their backyards or at their businesses. So very major spring snow event here. And then kind of on the flip side of this, we also saw severe storms. This is going back to the March 10th through 11th period. So this severe storm outbreak was a little earlier than what we would typically see. Peak severe weather season in parts of the Midwest typically comes a little bit later in the spring. But nonetheless, quite a significant severe weather outbreak. Several tornadoes, including this one in Union City, Michigan. This was kind of a crazy image with a tornado sitting over a frozen lake. We also had really big hail. So this is one hailstone that was captured in Illinois. It is a possibility that Illinois will set a new state record for largest hailstone. They're kind of doing a preliminary, there'll have to be an official investigation there to kind of determine whether that is indeed the case or not. But yes, definitely damage from both the tornadoes and the hail side. This is a damaged rain gauge here. And then you can see kind of how widespread those severe weather reports were in this SPC storm report map on the left there. And then another huge story, this is perhaps the most recent story that we've been talking about, is this remarkable heat wave in the western half of the country. Certainly, kind of the bulk of the heat is focused more in the desert Southwest area, but lots of us in our particular region have also been seeing pretty significant temperatures as well. As a personal anecdote, here in Fort Collins, we set our new monthly March record yesterday. We hit 85 degrees, and that broke the previous March record of 81. So set the new record by 4 degrees Fahrenheit, which is quite significant. And we still have 3 more days of this heat to go. Okay, so now we will be looking ahead to the future. Here is a grim photo of the Winter Park area from my boss, Russ Schumacher. As you can see in these lower elevations near the Winter Park area, this is probably like 8,000 feet-ish. Very thin to no snow cover in those areas. So it's been a bad winter here. Okay, so starting out with the flood outlook. So this map here is showing places that have at least a 50% chance or greater of seeing moderate or minor flooding. Minor flooding in the orange dots here, and then moderate in the red squares. So across the Midwest area, across the kind of lower Missouri River Basin area. Certainly the possibility for episodic flooding if we get some significant rains, severe storms over this period that could create kind of brief flooding in those areas. And then as you go further north, such as in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, those places still have quite a bit of snow cover on the ground. So some concerns there, snow melt as we get into the springtime. And this outlook is taking a look at the next 3 months. So this is kind of covers most of us of the rest of spring. Precipitation for the next 7 days. It's going to be dry for almost all of us. Maybe in the northern parts of the central region, might see some precipitation. Ohio might get in on some precipitation over the next several days, but otherwise very dry for the next week. And then talking about ENSO, so kind of the biggest update with ENSO that we've gotten in recent days is that according to the NOAA Climate Prediction Center, we're now under an El Niño watch. And that has been issued because conditions appear favorable that we'll be seeing El Niño conditions as we move into the summertime. So what this graph on the right is showing you is the likelihood of La Niña in blue, neutral ENSO conditions in gray, or El Niño conditions in red. How likely are we to see that over various 3-month periods throughout the rest of the year? So FMA would signify February, March, April, May, April, May, June, et cetera, et cetera. So you'll note that these red bars signifying high likelihood of El Niño go way up as we get into the summer and fall. Right now, we're still technically in La Niña. The conditions are pretty weak. We expect to get out of that soon. And then, as of right now, looking like a quick transition to El Niño conditions as we head into the summer. And then, in terms of what that would typically look like for us in the US, in the western part of the region, such as here in Colorado, sometimes they can get in on these wetter conditions thanks to an enhanced southwest monsoon that can kind of help pump in some moisture to areas like eastern Colorado and also parts of western Kansas. But kind of more significantly is that El Niño tends to correlate with drier than normal conditions across a pretty significant portion of the Midwest. And then El Niño also often favors warmer than average conditions for a lot of the northern part of the US as well. So that's kind of something to pay attention to as we head into the summertime. All right, so moving on to Climate Prediction Center outlooks. So this is taking a look at the 8 to 14 outlook across the US. On the left, we have temperature, and then on the right, we have precipitation. And what these maps are showing is how likely is it that we'll see above or below normal temperatures or above or below normal precipitation. So starting with temperature on the left here, anywhere that you see in red is favored to see above normal temperatures over the next 8 to 14 days. So that takes us from the end of March into early April. So you can see warmer than average temperatures expected for a huge portion of the country, including most of the North Central region. But as you do head up into the Upper Great Lakes region, potential for cooler than average temperatures in that particular area. But otherwise, the above average temperatures are, there's pretty strong confidence that we'll be seeing that at the end of March. And then for precipitation, less confidence there. So you'll note that we're only in this kind of light brown first category, which only favors about 30 to 40% confidence in below normal precipitation over that 8 to 14 day period. So much less confidence in what the precipitation will look like. But again, at least leaning towards below average for parts of the North Central region as of now, leaning slightly towards above average for parts of the Great Lakes area. And then taking a look at hazards over that same period, really the main hazard to talk about is the risk of high winds. So this map here is showing a slight risk of high winds over March 26th through 28th, and then a moderate risk on March 26th over this particular area. And kind of the main purpose of noting this is that a lot of these areas have seen active wildfires. Drought conditions are pretty widespread in a lot of these locations as well. So with high winds present, certainly fire danger could be a concern over this period. And then returning to our Climate Prediction Center outlooks. So this is for April. Again, we have temperature on the left here, precipitation on the right. So for the month of April, the Climate Prediction Center is forecasting above normal chances for above normal temperatures across, again, a lot of the US, particularly the Western US, less confidence over region, and then equal chances for above or below normal temperatures for the northern part of the the North Central region. And then for precipitation, kind of an interesting dichotomy here. Across the West, we have decently strong consensus in below normal precipitation expected for the western third of the country. But then as you get into the Midwest and Great Lakes region, um, elevated chances for above normal precipitation in April. So perhaps one positive sign for areas there that are still seeing persisting drought conditions and water restrictions. And then this is taking a look at water outlooks, kind of related to the whole story here. So this image on the left is showing wildfire potential for March. We're obviously halfway through March now, but you'll see some of these areas have been seeing some wildfires. Kansas, Colorado have both experienced wildfires over this period. So those conditions are kind of expected to persist as we continue on through the month. And then looking ahead, over the North Central region, really no major wildfire risk standing out as of now. But again, that could change as we move ahead with time. And then one more Climate Prediction Center outlook here. So this is looking at the seasonal outlook. So this is now for April through June 2026. A lot of the same story here, where we have these above normal temperatures favored for a lot of the country, particularly as you head further west, stronger confidence in seeing above normal temperatures there. And then for precipitation, perhaps leaning slightly towards below normal precipitation for the western part of the central region over this time period. But broadly for the region, kind of equal chances of seeing above or below normal precipitation. So jury's still out on kind of how those trends will shake out over the next 3 months. And then this is the seasonal drought outlook. So this goes from today out through the end of June. So kind of the big story here for the western part of the region, persisting or worsening drought conditions in some locations. And then as you head further east, we saw that over the next couple months, elevated chances for above normal precipitation over this period. So for drought conditions in places like Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Iowa, Minnesota, potential for those conditions to improve over the next few months. All right, so now finishing up here with some key changes. So most of the region has been warmer and drier than average, the exception being as you go further east, places like Michigan, Ohio have tended to be either closer to average or slightly below average on their temperatures, and have fared generally better on precipitation as well compared to areas further to the west. Snowpack across the entire western US has been very poor. Out of the western basins, the Missouri River Basin is in the best shape, but still important to emphasize that the conditions there are running below average. So it's reasonable to expect that we could be working with below normal water as we get into the runoff season. And then looking ahead at the next few months, above normal temperatures are broadly favored a lot of the North Central region. Potential uncertainty as you go further north into the Great Lakes area, but for most of us, looking at above normal temperatures being favored over that period. Precipitation is a lot less certain. It looks like, at least as we head into April, perhaps increased likelihood of above normal precipitation for parts of the eastern portion of the region, like Illinois. But as you head further west, getting closer to below normal precipitation being favored. But again, less confidence in the precipitation outlooks than the temperature. Much more confident that we'll be seeing above average temperatures over this period. We will be transferring out of La Niña in the next month or so. El Nino seems to be on deck as we start to move into the summertime, so that will certainly be something to watch. And that will no doubt be driving the climate outlooks that we'll be looking at over the next few months. So I will finish there, and I'm happy to take any questions. Feel free to email me after this webinar. I will like be totally completely transparent that I'm mostly an expert in Colorado, but this has been a fun exercise looking at the central region more broadly. So yeah, feel free to reach out, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that any of you have here. And thanks.
And thank you, Allie. That was very good, especially for your first time,
Thanks.
especially for such a broad area that's not just Colorado.
Yes.
So one reason we chose Allie was because of all the issues. I'll call them issues. I'm not going to say problems that Colorado it has and is facing as one of the major water providers for many parts of the U.S. And so you got a taste of that. You got a taste of what it's been record hot, and not record hot by a teeny bit. When they say 1.5 degrees over 3 months above normal, that's considerable. That's not a small jump. There's the kind of things we see nowadays that blow our minds as climatologists. So I just want to stress that a little bit.
And
And with,
that
yeah,
wasn't
go ahead.
above normal. That was above the previous record.
Oh,
So I think
I
above
didn't say
normal
that
it was
right, did
like
I? Yeah,
5 or 7 degrees.
right.
So
Above the
yeah.
record. Right. That's important to say that. Super important. Um, yeah. So, Dennis, I think you have a few comments you want to make real quick. One I'll make real quick before Dennis goes. He'll get him lined up here. Is that we talked about El Nino a lot during this. The big news here really is that there is a watch. A watch is different than an advisory or warning in that the percentage chance of it happening is something. Well, the percentage chance of it happening last I saw was like 65%. So there's still a chance it won't happen. However, the graph that she showed, and you can go back to that graph. Why don't you go back to the graph of El Nino over the seasons, if you will? Yeah. Yeah. So it goes up to about 80% as we go into the fall. So it's pretty likely the ocean's really warm. But the next graphic after this that you showed, I think it was right after this. Yeah. So this is December, January, February. It has nothing to do with the summer. This is common. I won't say common. This is more likely to happen during our winter season than our summer season. Okay. So don't get that confused on the timing of this. In fact, as we transition to from La Nina to El Nino, all bets are off on what exactly the impact is going to be, especially the spring, from anything in the equatorial Pacific. There will be impacts, but there's not strong indicators. I'll leave it at that. As we get to the end of summer and definitely into the fall and winter, then the impacts will become more apparent to us. So don't worry if you don't know what's going to happen. We don't either. And but we will over the next few months rein this in a little bit and give you a better idea. Dennis.
I'm going to correct Doug in one way. He's
No, you
saying
can't
we
correct.
don't know anything. We do know some things, like the heat, especially in the plains and west, seems quite likely. that's much more likely.
Yeah.
In the middle part of the U.S., the probabilities are not quite as strong. So thanks for clearing up that. I did want to add on to some things that Allie mentioned regarding the freeze this last weekend. She showed some of the early spring graphics and how we have some early leaf out and beginning of dormancy break. Um, that makes especially tree fruits, grapes, and some other plants more susceptible to cold temperatures. And we had very cold temperatures down into single digits. So did some checking this morning in areas from a little bit in Missouri, definitely Iowa, Illinois, over to Ohio. We were getting reports on tree fruit damage, potentially all loss of peaches in Illinois, um, and then some apple losses too. She did mention those. Further north, things were not quite as far along. Up in Minnesota, the bigger fruit producing areas up around the Great Lakes, those don't seem to have been damaged at this point. So, wanted to clear up that also. Doug, there were questions about wildfires that I think we should address here, especially the
Yeah.
wildfire potential map.
The significant wildfire potential map, I believe, is what we're addressing. Is that correct? Is that the way you read that,
Right.
Dennis? Yeah.
Yeah, and Michael posed an interesting question of why, well, Michael and Jessica, why is it not showing more significant wildfire potential when
Right.
there's significant
Yep.
going on?
Yep.
So,
Yep. Great questions. So it's some of its timing and some on how they put those things out, which is the first of every month. So April 1st, they'll have a redo of those. Now, Allie, if you go back, would you go to the significant wildfire uh, uh, prediction? It's outlook.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this one.
So you have March and June in there. We probably shouldn't have put June. We probably should have put April in there, which is a little bit different. But anyway, so some commonalities with season is that during spring, sometimes as early as February, well, definitely to our south, there's almost always a higher probability of rangeland or plains, if you will, fires. That's just the way it is. If there's snow cover to the north, which there commonly is, which there isn't this year, but there commonly is, that sort of decreases the odds of big wildfires. This year we don't have that, and it has been sort of dry especially in western Nebraska and Wyoming, places like that. I can't get into the minds of the people who did this, but they do have their analysis probably is looking at a number of things that I'm not aware of what makes it significant. So significant, in my mind anyway, is above normal, which is the key in these places, above normal probability or potential for fire. Was Nebraska in March above normal? I don't know that, but certainly with the winds that they've had and the dryness that they've had and the temperatures that they've had would point to that in my mind. Okay. Again, I'm not faulting these folks because I don't know enough about what goes into their calculations. So I don't know if that addresses it. Dennis, do you want to add anything or Allie?
I guess just one thing to note from these graphics here are that they are showing above normal likelihood of seeing wildfire potential. So to some extent in the Northern Plains area, there kind of always is some amount of
Yeah.
wildfire risk in the winter time. So I don't know, maybe just worth mentioning that just because it doesn't show an elevated risk doesn't mean that the risk is zero.
Right. No, definitely not zero, especially this time of year. The other thing that happens every year, almost every year, is that there is a period of green up that happens. And Dennis mentioned the phenology and all of that. Well, as things begin to grow from whatever moisture is left, the potential for wildfires in the plains anyway decreases. So it's, greener plants, less fire. Later in the summer, as things dry out again, that potential goes up again. So there is a seasonality to all of this as well. And like we said, snow does matter. So where there's snow, it's much less likely to happen. It can, but it's much less likely to happen over snow. Montana, Idaho, Wyoming. Yeah, so great question. Why isn't it up there? We would have to go to the website and look and see if over time they do start putting those in there. And normally their fire season isn't June. Could be this year. You see in the Four Corners area, it's going to be June, at least the significant stuff. But their wildfire potential begins, the big stuff really begins in July and August, and of course September too. So we'll have to look at that. Yes, snowpack record low in Colorado. Transitioning from La Niña to El Nino slowly versus quickly makes a difference. Oh, that's a good question. Dennis, do you know anything about the transition timing on these things?
No, I was going to let you swing on this one. I know there's been some work done on this. I don't remember off the top of my head during these transitions between the two as to what it means for severe weather.
Oh, well, okay. So severe weather wise, there's a slight correlation with severe weather during La Nina springs. We're coming out of a La Nina. It's one can argue either way, but I would argue right now we're still under La Nina atmospheric conditions, maybe not the ocean, but as far as the atmosphere is concerned, we're still under the La Nina influence, whatever that means. But that influence is waning quickly. Okay, so there's a, I'd say, a slight tilt towards more severe weather during La Nina springs than other years, but that's pretty slight. The jury is pretty much out on that. I don't know anything about the quick transition, and this may not be such a slow transition. This may be more of a fast transition. There's so much warm water under the surface in the along the equator that it wouldn't surprise me. I'll just put it that way. If all of a sudden we get much warmer water on the surface, and that's where we measure La Nina, El Nino. Summertime has less impact than the wintertime in terms of El Nino and La Nina. But again, we can argue about how much impact that is. What other questions do we have here?
The one in the chat on the South Platte.
Oh, I missed the South Platte.
It just came up.
Well, I don't see it, Dennis. So go ahead and say.
When will rivers like the South Platte be impacted by the low snowpack? And when will those conditions hit eastern Colorado and western Nebraska?
Oh, I see. It's in the chat. I see. I'm sorry. Yeah, so Allie, I don't know if you want to address that or not, but what else? You can either agree with me or disagree. Well, go ahead. You go ahead.
No, you go first. That's okay.
Oh, dang. They are already affected by the low. I would say already impacted because the snowpack is so pitiful, and the snow really hasn't come off yet. I'm assuming Allie may know more about that, but with the very, very warm temperatures, maybe it has. When will those conditions hit eastern Colorado? Yeah, good question. Arguably, they already have. Irrigation hasn't probably hasn't begun yet, unless somebody's irrigating some of their wheat or oats or something out there that's planted early or last fall. There's some of that, or maybe turf or grass or something like that. Allie, do you know yet? What do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I couldn't really speak on the irrigation schedule or anything down there. But I do know that in Colorado's southern basin, so like the Arkansas River Basin, and then it points north as well, so kind of the lower elevations of the South Platte, we've already started to see some melt off begin there over the last few days, according to some of the higher elevation snow tell stations that we have there. So a lot of those sit kind of between like 8,000 to 11,000 feet. And there we've already started to see snowpack decline over the last few days. So definitely those impacts I think will be being felt soon. Technically, we haven't actually reached our peak snowpack date in
Mm-hmm.
Colorado. I think it
Mm-hmm.
peaks generally around like early April
Mm-hmm.
statewide. Southern basins maybe a little bit earlier. So yeah, I don't think that the full effects have been felt yet because the runoff hasn't really fully begun yet, but certainly these next few days are going to be really bad for the snowpack.
Good
Really be
point.
seeing things melt.
Yep.
Kelsey Price just added in the chat that irrigation has begun in the lower Arkansas or Arkansas
Yeah.
Valley, depending on which you want to pronounce it.
Um,
Cool. That's helpful. Thanks, Kelsey.
yeah. And then so so the South Platte will suffer all year long. One of the things that happened earlier this year is that um, we got precipitation in the west, but it was low, it was it was wet, as in rain. Um, it was warm, so a lot of it fell as rain, and that's not captured well, or it sinks into the soils more and doesn't get captured by the reservoirs, which is super important. The reservoirs are the bank, if you will, for all those folks, for water supply, for all kinds of reasons in the West. So we want snowpack, and we want snowpack at mid and high level, well, lower elevation too. But if it's fantastically warm, like it's being now and will be for the next 2 or 3 days, uh, and it has been very warm, as we just mentioned 10 times, a lot of that snowpack is gone. So we're left with only the higher elevation stuff. And, when you have temperatures of 100 degrees or 90 or whatever nearby, I'm not saying it's that warm at 10,000 feet, don't get me wrong, but it's warm enough at the lower elevations that some of that warmth does affect some of that higher elevation snow, and it comes off way too early. And that's not what we want. We want a slow melt off to do the most good.
Yeah, and I believe yesterday, so Leadville, Colorado is the largest or the highest
Mm-hmm.
Colorado, and they're at 10,000 feet and they hit 59 degrees yesterday.
Yeah, that's
So,
crazy.
yeah, not great. Very warm even up high.
Okay. Yeah, that surprises me. Didn't know it was possible.
Yeah.
59 in the summertime is pretty good up there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so let's see. Any other questions? Oh, was there a few other things you wanted to hit, Dennis, real quick, just to be a little more
Yeah,
specific on?
just one other thing on from an outlook standpoint. Um, Allie showed
Oh,
the April outlook leaning towards the wetter side over much of the Corn Belt. And that would be a positive in some of the dry soil areas. I don't think we have too many areas that are soils are wet right now. So we'll see how that plays out. But unless we get quite wet, or depending on how the timing of that works, these initial early temperatures are probably going to bump up soil temperatures pretty well. And we could have especially in the plains and southern part of the Midwest, we could have early planting going on. Up north, we still have frost in the ground. I was looking at it over in Minnesota and Wisconsin, maybe a little bit in Michigan too, but we still have frost in the ground to some depth. So it'll be a little bit longer there, but I think early activity seems fairly likely in the southern parts of the Midwest.
did you want to mention anything about the Illinois?
Oh,
hail?
yeah, real briefly to kind of enhance what Allie was talking about. When there is a possible state record of a temperature, rainfall, or in this case, a hail event, there is a preliminary report put out saying, hey, this could be, and that's the picture that she showed there. And then there is a committee that is put together called the State Climate Extremes Committee that includes the state climatologist, the regional climate center, and then other something from the National Weather Service, where they review this and say, yes, it looks like all procedures were followed, and it's going to be a state record. Sometimes there are details, especially like temperatures or things were not measured quite the right way, and it's overturned. But this one looks fairly clearly like it's going to be a state record hail.
And then finally, Allie, this is kind of an important thing we always do in March. Go back to the River Forecast Center outlook for flood outlook, if you will. So every spring, the Weather Service, River Forecast Centers, for the most part, put out a hydrologic outlook for their area. So we got the Ohio, we got the upper Mississippi, and we got the Missouri, more or less, all in here. And this map is there's a few places that they're going to be in more risk than usual for flooding, but most of these areas that have the orange squares, most of them, especially in Missouri, let's say across southern Illinois and some of the I guess Iowa and such, those are areas that flood anytime there's a major convective, in other words, thunderstorm sort of activity over those areas. And I'm not going to necessarily call them flashy. They can be flash flood, but anytime you have 2 or 3 inches of rain, they're going to go into minor flood. That's just the way it is. So they're highlighting those areas. The other areas of highlight, I would say, for this spring are in the Upper Peninsula, where Allie showed places that got 5 feet of snow over that period. 5 feet of snow, of mostly lake effect snow, in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and in portions of northern Wisconsin. Crazy amounts of snow, and maybe a little bit in the Red River and such. Red River to the north, which flows north into Canada, North Dakota, Minnesota border. There's some red zones there, so moderate flooding, which isn't that uncommon, to be honest, in the Red River. The thing that can cause problems wherever there's snow and ice and things on the ground, or frozen precipitation on the ground, is rain on top of that and warm temperatures. So if the Upper Peninsula gets up to 60, 70 degrees and then a thunderstorm comes along, watch out. That's danger zone in terms of major flooding. We hope it melts off slowly as opposed to really quickly. The later in the season we go with snow cover, the worse, the higher the probability of some kind of flooding is going to happen. So, yeah, I just wanted to make sure we all sort of understood all that stuff. I think that's it, and it's 2:00. So I'm going to say thank you, everybody. And Molly gave me the thumbs up. She's from the North Central Forecast Center. And so I got away with saying what I said. Until next time, I believe Dennis is going to be our presenter next month. I don't think we said that out loud, but I'll say it right now. So get ready for a lot of agricultural goodness and other things. So thank you all, and talk to you next month.